Okay, hi and welcome to another edition of Hacking Maths. Today we're going to look at factorizing quadratics where a is greater than 1. So let's do a quick recap. If you remember, all quadratics take the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is the coefficient of the x squared, b is the coefficient of x, and c is the number on its own. Now what we're talking about here is we want to be able to factorize a quadratic where the coefficient of the x squared is not equal to 1. It's bigger than 1. So let's start off with an example. So we have 7x squared minus 8x plus 1. Now, if you watch the other video on factorizing quadratics where a is equal to 1, then you should be familiar with the method so far. Now this is exactly the same method that I used in the first example of that video. Check the description below for a link. So, the first thing we want to do is write down our coefficients. So a is equal to 7, b is equal to negative 8, and c is equal to 1. Now remember, I always like doing AC because we need to use AC to find the numbers that we can use. So a times c, so 7 times 1 is 7. This gives us the target number which we're looking to multiply to get our answers. So numbers that multiply to make 7, well 7's prime, so the only numbers that multiply to make 7 are 1 and 7. Now, the numbers that we choose must multiply to make AC and, at the same time, if we added them together, make B. So B is negative 8. Well, the only way I can make negative 8 with 1 and 7 is to use minus 1 minus 7. Now, we have to check these. Do these multiply to make positive 7? Yes, they do. So, because they do, we're ready to go. Let's start with our example. We write out our 7x squared. We split the negative 8x into our negative 1x and our negative 7x plus 1. These numbers coming from the two numbers that we picked earlier. We then separate these two pairs of numbers like so. Open parentheses, 7x squared minus 1x, close parentheses. Now to keep things mathematically correct, we write a nice big plus sign. And then inside the second set of parentheses, negative 7x plus 1. Okay, so if we were to remove these parentheses just now, mathematically this would be correct. So whatever sign of each of the coefficients are, for the x must go inside the parentheses. So we have negative 7x, the negative 7x must be inside the parentheses. So we look at our 7x squared minus 1x and see what's in common. Well, the only thing that 7x squared has in common with negative 1x is x. So x goes on the outside and we can start to write our parentheses. So x times what is 7x squared? X times 7x. X times what is negative 1x is negative 1. Okay, now we look here and we see what's common to both. Well, actually, I can't see any numbers that are common. However, there is a hint. This negative in front of the 7 is telling us that we're probably going to have to take out a negative. So let's take the negative out. But negative what? Well, let's see. The only number I can see that's common to negative 7 and to 1 is 1. Because if I divide both of those numbers by 1, I get the same answer. So let's take out negative 1 and see if this works. Negative 1 times what gives me negative 7x? Negative 1 times 7x. Negative 1 times what gives me positive 1? Well, that would be negative 1. So let's do our quick check. Did we get both parentheses, this set of parentheses here, and this set of parentheses here? Are they both the same? Yes, they are. It means we have factorized correctly. So let's write down our answer. Oops. Make sure I pick the right pen. So we write down what's inside, 7x minus 1. And we write down here, x minus 1. Now it doesn't actually matter which way we write down these parentheses. I could write x minus 1 times 7x minus 1. These are both the same thing. Now, we can't make assumptions because we've only done one, but it doesn't really look like we could go from our initial choosing of the numbers to the final answer. Let's do another example and see what happens, and let's see if we can figure out if there is something there. So let's take another question. Let's go 3x squared minus 13x minus 10. Okay, so our a is equal to 3, our b is equal to negative 13, and c is equal to negative 10. AC equals negative 30. All right, what numbers multiply to make 30? Now remember, I always like to just think of the positive number and then worry about the sign afterwards. Well, let's look for our factors. 1 times 30 is 30. 2 times 15 is 30. 3 times 10 is 30. 4 doesn't go into 30. 5 times 6 is 30. Okay. 6 times 5 is 30, and we've started to repeat, so we stop there. So all of these factor pairs will multiply to make 30. However, we have to pick the correct pair that adds to make negative 13. Now, can we make negative 13 with 1 and 30? There's no way. I don't see any way that we could add these two numbers together, so we can discount 1 and 30. How about 2 and 15? Well, I could do 2, positive 2, take away 15, and that equals negative 13. So that's a possibility. How about 3 and 10? I could do negative 3 minus 10, and that equals negative 13. So that's a possibility. And 5 and 6, well, the biggest number I can get with them is 11 or 1, so it's not going to be those. So we've got a choice between 2 and 15 and 3 and 10. Now, we have to remember that the numbers we pick must also multiply to make AC. So if I picked 2 and negative 15, that equals, if we multiply them together, negative 30. If I pick negative 3 and times that by negative 10, I get positive 30. I need to have negative 30. So the only one choice that I can make is positive 2 and negative 15. So let's choose them and get on with the problem. So 3x squared minus 15x plus 2x minus 10. Now, we start the same way, put the first pair into parentheses and the second pair into parentheses. So 3x squared minus 15x, then a big plus sign, and then the next two with including their sign. So positive 2x minus 10 goes into parentheses. Okay, so if I remove those parentheses, everything would be mathematically correct. So what's common to 3x squared and minus 15x? Well, we can see that 3 is common to 3 and 15, so we can write that down. And x is common to both as well, so we can write that down. So that leaves me 3x on the outside. So 3x times what is 3x squared? That would be x. And 3x times what is negative 15x? That would be negative 5. Okay. If we look at the next one, it's a positive 2x. That tells me it's going to be a positive number coming out. Is there any letters in common? No letters in common. Any numbers? 2 goes into 2 and into 10, so 2 comes out. So 2 times what gives me positive 2x? 2 times x. 2 times what gives me negative 10? Negative 5. Okay, so let's quickly check. Did I get this? Whoops. Did I get this parentheses and this parentheses to match? Yes, I did. They are both the same. So we can now write down our final answer. So x minus 5 and 3x plus 2. Okay. So we can see here that we've got x minus 5 and 3x plus 2. And we chose 2 and negative 15. Not quite straightforward as going to the final answer. I'm sure those of you who are able may be able to see where that's coming from, and we could perhaps figure out a shorter way of doing this, but this method here will get you the right answer every time. Now, if you're a little unsure where the 3x plus 2 comes from, it just comes from the 3x here at the front of the first parentheses and the plus 2, which is in front of the second parentheses. That's all we've got time for this week. I hope to see you again on Hacking Maths.